Hello everyone, and welcome to the NGH chapter meeting for June of 2026. So happy to be here with all of you. My name is Jody Solberg. I'm the chapter president, and we have our board members all here with us today, which is wonderful. We have Karina Hoover, who is our amazing events person, our events coordinator, and Faith is here with us too. She is our treasurer. Barbara's here. She's our membership chair. Yay, hello. And Joe T, my wonderful vice president, and Danny, who is our MVP, our secretary. So wonderful to have you all here. And so you know, if you are watching this and you are not a member yet of NGH Washington, we would love to have you join us. We are the chapter for Washington State. However, you don't have to be in Washington State to join us, and you don't even have to be a member of the National Guild of Hypnotists greater organization to join us. You can be a part of our community. And what's wonderful about that is so many times we're solopreneurs, we're working on our own, and we don't have to be. We get to have community with one another. We do meet on the second Saturday, typically of every month, except for a couple times a year when we have our holiday party, for example. Then we're not meeting on Saturday mornings, we're meeting in the evening for a social event. And we also have our World Hypnotism Day event, and that date this year is TBA, to be announced, but it is at the beginning of the year, so that's going to be early in 2027. We're looking at some potential dates right now, but that is in Lake Terrace in Washington. And so we would love to have you join us. Of course, you can join us virtually each month or in person in the Seattle area. And it's $50 per year to join. You do get discounts on our events. You get listed in our directory on the website. So fantastic for searchability, SEO, and to put your presence out there and let people know what you do and how to find you. So that is a little bit about NGH Washington. And now I want to introduce our guest speaker for this month. Jeremy Huggard is an amazing speaker and person. I'm excited to introduce him to you. He came to hypnosis relatively recently, actually, just in the last couple years, starting in 2024. He got certified with Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy in early 2025. And now he's working towards opening his own online practice in 2026. So he is newer to this field, but he has some really fascinating information to share with us with his ego state work. That was something he was drawn to really early on, and the majority of Jeremy's continued education and practice sessions have focused on that. So can't wait to learn from him. His role as a hypnotist, he believes, is to help clients more readily access their own internal resources. I completely agree with that. And establish forward momentum with confidence, resilience, and grace. Doesn't feel like there's a single best way to do this, but working with those ego states is the one that resonates with him the most, and so that is what he's going to share. Very client-centered, again, something we have in common. So his approach can change dramatically from client to client, but the goals are always the same. And he wants to help their ego states work together to feel enthusiastic about their roles and to feel happier in general. So I know he's going to be so successful in his practice with that approach, and he's going to share with us everything that he has learned along the way about ego states today. So Jeremy, come on over.
Thank you, Jody, and thank you, Danny, for forcing me to do this. Not something I necessarily would have chosen to do, but it's exciting, it's fun, that's cool. I'm going to do something here which might be a little confusing, and we'll talk about it later, but I'm just going to find this channel here between my ring and pinky fingers on my left hand. And for me, I'm just going to, if you want to go along with this, you can go ahead and join me, but I'm just going to tap here in this little channel. I'm going to say a few affirmations, a bit of a laundry list of things that I'm trying to achieve today. So I am an articulate speaker. I am calm. I'm confident. I can access all the information that I need at any time. I am kind and compassionate. I'm a helper and a healer. And I'm going to put these two fingers together, the ring finger and the thumb. Look at it. Momentum for me. Might be a different word for you. Awesome, peace, whatever. We'll get back to that in a bit. Okay, so Why don't we start with a story? I'd like to talk about Gus. Gus is a part that I met, who's the first part that kind of surprised me in this work. It wasn't a part that I was looking for, and it was very, at the time at least, it felt very unique. So I was working with, as us hypnotists tend to do, a willing participant who wasn't necessarily at threshold, but was willing to let me practice with them. And we were working on trying to alleviate hay fever, allergies, common pollen things. They can be kind of, like, I think as hypnotists, more acute allergies to things like shellfish or peanut butter or whatever, that is something that's pretty easy to do. Hay fever can be a little bit more slippery because you don't really have something in front of you that you can see that you're allergic to a lot of the time. So in exploring this, I was talking to different states, different parts, and we found Gus. And Gus was in charge of this person's sneezing. And what that means is every time this person sneezed, Gus would come to the front, the sneeze would happen, Gus goes back. Gus was not a happy guy. He was, well, first of all, if we describe him, if Gus was standing in front of a mirror, I guess he would describe himself as a little bouncing ball of brown light, kind of spiky looking, and kind of small. And he sounded, when he spoke through this person, of course, I mean, the only way he can speak is through their mouth. He sounded like he was maybe 4 years old, I would guess. So very expressive, and every time he talked, he'd kind of sound like almost like a little bit of a cartoon guy. And Gus was upset. He didn't like to sneeze. He didn't like being in charge of it. It's something that he had to do for literally decades at this point. This is a person who was in their 40s. And so I asked Gus, well, if you don't want to be in charge of sneezing, what would you rather do? And he said, oh, I want to taste sweet things. And I say, okay, well, what kind of sweet things are most appealing to you? He says, I want to eat donuts. So at this stage in their life, this person already has a part that is in charge of eating donuts. So I ask, who is that part? And we find Jess. This is a part that is already aware of. Jess was this person's pleasure part. So anytime they're enjoying something, if that would be like reading a good book, eating a good meal, watching a movie that's making them laugh a lot, something that's very engaging and they're taking pleasure from. Also things like sexual pleasure, obviously. Anytime they're enjoying something, this part is at the front, kind of getting the most out of that feeling. And so we asked Jess in that moment, how do you feel about Gus taking over sweet things? Would that be okay with you? And she says, well, yeah, that's fine. I've got a lot of things that I can enjoy. You can have that. It's great. And it's not like Jess doesn't experience those things anyways. Every time you're experiencing something, all of your parts that are near the front are experiencing those things to some degree. So then Gus takes over sweet things. And what does that mean? Every time she bites into something sweet, Gus comes to the front, tastes it, enjoys it, and maybe he'll linger a little bit and have some of that childlike enjoyment there for a bit, and then he goes back. His old existence in their neural network was kind of isolated. Sneezing isn't necessarily something that comes up all the time. So now Gus's role to taste sweet things, he interacts more with other parts, but he's also he thinks of himself as not locked in place, and he goes around to the other parts, he visits, he sees what they're up to. I don't know what he talks about with them, but he sounds like he's not lonely, and he's enjoying his experience. And I like the story of Gus because it wasn't something that I was looking for, but we were just looking to see what we could find about dealing with a particular problem. And in that exploration, we found a part that was in distress. And that distress might not have been causing problems in that person's life, but anytime a part is feeling distress, a bit of that is going to come to the surface it's going to bubble to the surface in some way. So now Gus is happier. The person that Gus lives in, so to speak, is happier. She still sneezes. It's a physiological response to things, so it's still going to happen, but Gus isn't in charge of it anymore. And maybe another part who's more willing to take that over is taking care of that. The bottom line is that I want parts to be happy when we find them. And so, okay, so if we're moving on from Gus, why don't we talk about just very briefly the history of ego states. In the late 1920s, there was a guy named Paul Federn, who was a psychoanalyst, contemporary of Sigmund Freud, And I suspect this is why he called it ego states. We're talking about ego, superego, id, all that kind of stuff with the psychoanalysis. But in the late 20s, he wrote a couple of books that were, as far as I'm aware, the first time somebody had documented the existence of things like ego states and parts. Moving further down the line, we have like Eduardo Weiss, or maybe Weiss, who I think finished documenting some of the things that Paul Federer had been working on before he unfortunately committed suicide, I think in the early 50s, from I think a cancer diagnosis. He didn't want to deal with that, understandably. Back then, I don't know what your chances were with cancer in the 50s, but it seems like it's probably a lot less than now. Then building on that, we have John and Helen Watkins, who came onto the scene, a husband and wife couple of psychologists, and they worked on things like ego states, multiple personalities, and therapy involving those things. I think Paul Federer was more interested in the existence of those things, but didn't necessarily have a therapy protocol involved with how to manipulate those things. More, he was just about accentuating the positive. So I think, as I understand it at least, John Watkins is maybe kind of well known for being involved in the interview process with the Hillside Strangler, which is a serial killer situation that happened in California in the late 70s. And he discovered through that process that there were possibly multiple personalities involved with this serial killer. There were two men working together in this. I think ultimately that was not accepted as a basis for insanity or whatever, and he was still charged and imprisoned, the person involved in these killings. But if you want to go more in depth on a situation like that, there's also a book called The Minds of Billy Milligan by Daniel Keyes. Very interesting book about kind of the same situation, about a person who was having multiple personality disorder, and some of his parts were committing crimes. And he actually was able to not go to prison and was in psychiatric hospitals for about a decade, and after that he got to be reintroduced to society. I think ultimately there was maybe close to 30 parts that were very distinct that were coming to the front. And when we're talking about parts in that way, I just want to stress, like, we're not talking about multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder at all. That's when your parts are in very poor communication. Most people don't really have that level of trauma. This is something that's caused by extreme trauma when you're young, and that's not something most of us have. Most of us, our parts are communicating and healthy, to a larger degree than that at least. As we move on from Watkins and Watkins, we go to, in the 90s, I think John Watkins published his the culmination of his studies on ego states, but then we also have Gordon Emerson coming onto the scene, who's a researcher. I think he's in Australia now, if I recall correctly. But he started studying the efficacy, I guess, of ego state therapy, and he found it was very successful in helping with migraines initially. I think migraines, and then also menstruation migraines. And he found that there's a lot of improvement in how that occurred over it's one session a week for 4 weeks. And then he expanded on that to create resource therapy. It's kind of interchangeable with ego state therapy in terms of the approach. But resource therapy deals with all of the stuff that we tend to deal with hypnosis. Just in a, I suppose, a more personal way, because you're talking to the parts that are actually experiencing those emotions in a very one-on-one nature, and sometimes you're negotiating with them, sometimes you're just helping them to feel better, et cetera, et cetera. So Gordon Emerson is kind of who influenced a lot of Mike Mandel's approach to this kind of stuff, and that's where the basis of, as Jody said, my training has come from. And I love Gordon Emerson so much. I have a lot of his books. I've got 3 of them sitting next to me here. I think he's kind of the gold standard for parts therapy right now. I guess there's also there's also like Richard Swartz with internal family systems, something I don't personally have a lot of experience with. It sounds a little bit more structured than I would like it to be, and so I haven't, I guess, gone deeper on that. But I'm sure all of these approaches are using this different tools to accomplish the same goals, and I'm sure it works just as well as anything. Maybe that's something I'll look into at a later time. Anyways, okay, where are we going with this? Gordon Emerson. Yeah, so If we talk about, I guess, a rundown on basic ego state theory, let's say that there are between 5 and 15-ish states that are the ones that are your main guys that are coming to the front. Okay, those are the ones that are dealing with the majority of your life, and then behind them we could picture, I don't know. I hear a lot of different numbers. I've heard 100 to 150, 150 to 350. I would think 350 is maybe the upper limit of kind of background states who are doing things that don't require coming to the front. Just background things of like maintenance in your life or little jobs that don't really come up all the time. My understanding is that the more variation you have in your life, or the more activities you have that are very different from each other, the more parts you'll develop in order to accommodate those things. So what we're talking about with parts is basically they're at their core coping mechanisms. All of these things are designed to facilitate survival at its basic level. We want you to be standing, breathing, and your heart beating. And if those things are happening, then your parts are happy. That doesn't necessarily mean that your parts are doing things that make you have an emotional high point. You could be miserable, but if you're breathing, then your parts are like, well, yeah, we're doing a good job. So I think the model that I've heard of how this could be structured that I like the best, I heard this from Mike Mandel, was the bungalow model. A bungalow being a single-story house with a single door in the front and maybe a basement. Okay, so with this bungalow, the front porch would be considered the executive. And parts are digital. They cannot, as opposed to, I guess, analog. Analog being turning a dial, right? And digital being an on or off switch. And so if in this bungalow, we have these 10 or 15 parts on that main floor. And at any time that you are awake and conscious and doing things, you have a part in the executive who's come out to the front door to interact with the world. Those parts are going to be probably pretty different from each other because they're all doing different jobs. Some of them might be very kind, some of them might be bullies, some of them might be very shy, or some might be social. All of these parts serve very different roles, and they tend to, I guess in somebody who's in a lot of distress, not have very good communication, at least. For somebody who's very emotionally balanced and very, I think, stable, you'll find that getting in there and talking to their parts, that they actually do work together quite a bit. And that's, I think, the hallmark of what helps the most in these situations, is getting parts on the same page. Rowing the boat in the same direction is a kind of a metaphor that I like to use, because if everybody's rowing in a different direction, you just kind of spin in circles, right? So this bungalow model, we've got the executive on the front, we've got the main floor, and then we've got the basement. And in the basement are those 100 to maybe 350 parts that are kind of in the background. And parts can kind of shift up and down between the basement and the main floor, depending on what's going on in your life. But in general, the ones who are on the main floor are paying attention. Like everything that you're experiencing, they're experiencing. The ones in the basement, maybe not so much. I just want to make sure. Yeah, I can see if there's chat, if there's any questions. If there's any questions at all, please, don't hesitate. But the ones in the basement, those are going to be parts that are not necessarily coming to the front ever. It might be childhood parts that you don't really access anymore. When somebody can't remember large parts of their childhood, there's a pretty good chance. We tend to hear kind of the cliche, I guess, idea of, oh, you had a really traumatic childhood, so you've blocked it out. That's not necessarily true in my experience. It's just that the parts that experience those things in your childhood are not really coming to the front anymore. And so if we want to dig into the basement and find out who's in there and who might want to come and join the party again, sometimes you can find all kinds of interesting memories and things that have fallen by the wayside, behaviors and memories, and also maybe talents and skills and things. Not necessarily useful, because if they were useful, they'd still be coming to the front. But there's I think the fun thing about parts is that they have the ability to learn and grow, which is not something that they necessarily are aware of. Because we're talking about literal neural pathways, axons and dendrite connections in your brain, and there's not a lot of room for improvisation in something that's just a neural pathway. It's built to do a job. Okay, going back to the bungalow, one last thing is the bomb shelter, something maybe that's below the basement, and that is where we have fated states. This is a term from resource therapy from Gordon Emerson. It means states that are invaded by typically fear, confusion, disappointment, or rejection. That can include a whole swath of terrible things. Fear, I think, is the one we most commonly deal with in hypnosis. But rejection, disappointment, and confusion can cause their own kind of unique problems. So if if a state is invaded, that means it is feeling an extreme amount of emotion. Typically, they're formed in childhood, and there are states that are stuck in kind of a permanent state of emotional turmoil. And if they come to the front, it can cause a lot of problems. So there are a lot of states that basically try to appease them and keep them hidden down in the bomb shelter, not because they don't want them there, but because it just helps the overall condition of the person if they're not interfering with your life. Okay, so with the bungalow model, I think I've also heard a classroom model is not quite as elegant. Mike Mandel has the podium model. The bungalow model, I think, best covers it in a generic way. Okay. So, if we're talking about different kinds of states, I'm sorry, like Danny had mentioned to me that nobody's really talked about ego states here for NGH-WA
not for
before.
Our NGH. No.
So I thought I might just do a bit of a crash course on what kind of states we're going to encounter. So obviously, the first one, healthy ego state. What does that look like? A healthy ego state is a part that is happy about its job, because they will definitely have a distinct job that they do. That's kind of their purpose, and that there's not anything that's interfering with their job. So, healthy states tend to be the ones that are getting stuff done for you. If you've got a lot of stuff that's happening in your life that you're taking care of and you're being successful at it, that's a healthy state stepping in and being like, yeah, this is me. I do this. I can take care of this. I know this. When we start to get into trouble things here, we're talking about like dissonant states. Dissonant states are maybe the easiest problem to solve. A dissonant state is a state that is the wrong state coming to the front at the wrong time, which is to say it might be a state that is not suited for a particular job, but is asking to do that job. Some examples might be somebody who is public speaking and they're stumbling over their words. They can't remember what they were supposed to talk about. They're shaking. That's because their public speaking part did not come to the front for whatever reason. Maybe the part that's nervous or feeling anxious about being judged or something along those lines just felt so powerful that they overrode the one who's actually supposed to be there. You can see this in athletics. Somebody totally just flubbing their performance. It's just that their state didn't show up that day. In those situations, basically you're just going to go and talk to the state that showed up and had the problem and ask, like, hey, it sounds like you are not suited for this job. Is there another part that is? And typically there is, because this is something that they're aware of as being a problem. And we can just have them agree, like form a literal formal like agreement with a handshake if you want, or this is all happening in their head, but a hug, a high five, whatever you want to do, fist bump, of like, yeah, when we're doing this job, this guy who is suited for it comes to the front, and this guy who's afraid of it or intimidated by it doesn't ever have to do it again, and they can step to the side. And as they have that agreement, it just becomes easier for them to do that job. That's something that, of course, is not necessarily going to be a 100%. Every time this happens, it's going to work successfully, but over time, it's just something that as they grow comfortable working together, it becomes easy, Conflicted states. Okay, this one's a little bit more complicated because we've got two different states who are they might have the same goal, but they don't have the same method of achieving that goal. But they might also not have the same goal. They're states that are basically butting heads. And when that happens, of course, it's going to cause you distress. Here's an example, I guess. Here's a donut sitting on a plate. I want to eat this donut, but you know what? That's a lot of calories, and maybe I shouldn't have that today unless I go work out. Okay, well, let's think about working out. I don't really want to go work out. I kind of want to sit on the couch and scroll TikTok or something. So you've got one state who wants to do healthy things, and one state who wants to relax, one state who wants to eat bad food, another state who wants to go have a stick of celery or whatever. When this happens, what we're going to typically do is bring those, we're going to induce a trance, bring the states that are in conflict together, and basically negotiate. Can we find common ground here? Can we have an agreement that when we're doing this, this state takes over, when we're doing this state takes over? And again, finding that formal agreement between them that when we have this situation, we have this set response that we're going to do. And in that way, working together, they can kind of move forward, not just with that behavior, but other behaviors that they might be involved in. Conflicted states, retro states. Okay, this is kind of an interesting one. Actually, before we talk about retro states, let's talk about vaded states again. Okay, so vaded states, we talked about how they're invaded by fear, rejection, confusion, and disappointment. So what does that mean? Excuse me, my allergies are making me a little... But typically in childhood, I would say often below the age of 7, sometimes a little older, a child will have an emotionally traumatic moment that they just don't know how to deal with. They don't have the maturity, they don't have the context in order to understand what has happened, and it kind of blows a fuse for that part. And when that happens, they get locked in place. It's honestly, if I were to imagine what a version of hell would be, this is what it is, which is that it's the state having its worst day over and over again forever. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a wildly traumatic thing. Some of the things that I've encountered from like the perspective of being a relatively stable, emotionally mature adult myself, I can look at that and say, wow, that's really benign. And probably the person as an adult themselves looking at that situation can say, that wasn't so bad. But the magnitude of that event is not really what's important, it's their perception of that event. And so, as an example of a vaded state that I encountered, a child was told as they were in school, okay, it's the end of the day, we need to clean up all our toys to make the room nice for everybody tomorrow morning. And this state feels extreme anger that I don't want to do that for them. I don't want to do that. Like, I don't get anything from that. Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do things for other people? And now we've got a vaded state that whenever that guy has to do something for other people, he gets a little bit pissed. Let's see. Another one. A state has a father, or a child has a father that doesn't spank children. And so when he talks to him and I guess disciplines him, it's without spankings, it's without physical violence, it's talking. And this child sees other young boys getting spankings, and he starts to associate that with, oh, that's how parents are showing their love for their children, is when they spank them, they're validating their existence or their emotional significance. And so he starts to long for, I wish my dad would spank me in that way to show me that he loves me. And then as that person gets older, that vaded state is still there in the background, feeling, I just want an older man, I want a man to spank me. And then as they get older, they don't understand those feelings. They're like, I like to be spanked by older men. And they develop a sexual fetish. And that's not necessarily a problem, but that state feels like this compulsion for this thing. And when it doesn't get it, they get irritable. There's more common things, just a thing where they were overwhelmingly frightened, a thing where they were overwhelmingly disappointed, a thing where they were expecting something and they didn't get it. When we talk about fear, I think we all are pretty familiar with what the results of fear, a state invaded by fear would be: anxiety, paralysis, or decision paralysis sometimes, those kinds of things. Arguably what we deal with the most. Rejection. We talked about parts that are feeling not good enough, and they need to be perfect in some way. And that can come up in behaviors like buying a lot of stuff, or working out too much, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, that kind of thing. How do we get to perfect? And that feeling of not good enough that never goes away, because that state is always in the background thinking they are not good enough. Confusion. This is typically just resulting in things like rumination, kind of obsessive thinking, like the need to understand why. why did something not happen? What did they need to do differently? How can they fix it? Over and over and over again, stuck in a loop. Disappointment. This, again, we're talking about not necessarily something that is objectively massively disappointing. We're talking about something that is perceived to be disappointing, and so it could be not that big of a deal in the bigger scheme of things. And that can just cause depression, sadness, that kind of thing. Dwelling on the thing that they didn't get, wishing that they got it. So if we're moving on from vaded states, then we can talk about retro states a little bit. There's two kinds of retro states. Retro meaning from childhood, but retro original states are states that are responsible for a lot of antisocial behavior because they are states that learned how to avoid things that they didn't want to do as a child. Go clean your room, bath time, eat your vegetables, go play with this kid that you don't really like, go practice your piano. All these things that you don't want to do as a kid, these states develop coping mechanisms to figure out how to circumnavigate or circumvent rather those things they don't want to do. Throwing a tantrum, crying, hiding, withdrawing. Negotiation, I suppose, would be a healthier one. But the antisocial one's physical violence, attacking people. When we have an adult who is exhibiting those kind of childish behaviors, that's typically a retro-original state. And what we're going to do with a retro-original state is try to find a mature, kind, patient, happy, healthy state who can come in and help them to navigate those situations with more grace, essentially, to teach them to grow up. And you can often see in those situations that the child state does not realize that that person is an adult. You'll ask them, how old are you? Or you can ask the other state, they might not be necessarily aware of how old they are. But let's say there's a little 3-year-old state. It's not aware of how old that person is. So like, I'm 48 or 47. You kind of lose track after a while. But
I do that too. I'm like, wait, how old am I? Yeah.
Doing the math, I'm somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
But if I have a little state that's 2 years old and it's misbehaving in some sort of way, if I throw tantrums every time I don't get my way, and you talk to that state, they'll and say like, did you know that Jeremy is no longer 2 years old? He's actually 48 years old, and he's lived a very full life and has all of these things in his life. And they'll be like, whoa, no, that's crazy. Because they're kind of locked in place a little bit. They've got that arrested development. So we're going to have that other state come in and help them out a little bit. With retro-avoidant states, now we're talking a little bit about vaded states as well, because retro-avoidant states, along with the protector states, are states that are kind of running interference. So this is not a state that's necessarily from your childhood, but it's a state that's designed to keep a vaded state in the bomb shelter, essentially. If the vaded state comes out, it causes problems. So what does a retro-avoidant state do? It runs interference by maybe doing an unwanted behavior. That could be addiction of some sort, drugs and alcohol. It could be, there's so many things to be addicted to. You could be scrolling on your phone, video games, watching TV, etc., smoking. Any kind of behavior, maybe compulsive hair pulling. Any behavior that is drawing their attention away from the thing that is triggering that vaded state. The retro-avoidant state is in charge of running that behavior. And in those situations, if you try to help the retro-avoidant state, it will basically not do anything. It might help for a day or something, but then they'll go right back to the old thing because the vaded state is still there. The vaded state is still there, feeling what they feel. So in those situations, you're going to go around the retro-avoidant state and go to the vaded state. I'm not familiar how known or used this term is in broader hypnosis, but in Mandel I learned it as the ISE, the initial sensitizing event.
That's common, yeah.
Also in resource therapy with Gordon Emerson. And we're going to go to that ISE and find that vaded state and make some changes. We're going to take them out of that place where they're feeling put upon and put them in a place where they feel happy. We're going to bring in a state that is very nurturing and kind and wants to help them. In Gordon Emerson's resource therapy, typically you'll use language like, okay, Jody, if you were if you came into this room and saw this little child sitting in the dark, crying and feeling very alone, how would you want to help them? What would you want to do? And the typical answer you're going to get is, I would want to go over and comfort them and give them a hug and help them out. And that is their caring, nurturing state coming forward to say, like, this is how I would help. And that state, then you're going to enlist to be like, okay, can you stay with this state? And then we're going to say, let's get them out of this room. Let's open the window. Let's pull back the blinds. Let's turn on the lights. And let them know that they don't have to be alone anymore. They don't have to suffer this feeling anymore. And what is something that makes them happy? Oh, I want to go to the park. Okay, so let's go to the park. Let's go on a sunny hill. Let's go be around other kids. Let's do something that makes you happy. Let's go to your grandma's house where you always felt safe, whatever that is. We're going to create a safe space for them to go to that is no longer that dark room. And as that vaded state no longer has to feel locked in place of living the worst day of their life over and over again, the retro-avoidant state that behavior can just fall away because it's not necessary anymore. In the same way, we have protector states. Protector states are also running interference for vaded states, but they're doing that by distracting you. So that might, if you have somebody who, whenever they get triggered in a certain way, they suddenly just become explosively angry. Or somebody who starts to, I guess, get hyper-focused on a particular word or a phrase or a gesture. Somebody who, what else? Intellectualizing. Oh, that's a tough one. Where they don't allow them to feel feelings, they just say, like, we don't access feelings, we just think about them. That's a protector state running interference. Protector states, I think, I couldn't say that there's a percentage that I think is consistent with this, but sometimes retro-avoidant states and protector states do not know that they are running interference or evaded state. They think that their job is just to do this thing. So bridging to that ISE is very important to make sure that the state that is feeling those things is in the front and accessing those feelings. I guess we like to talk about, can you feel that in your body? Where do you feel that in your body? That's us accessing the thing that needs help the most in those moments. Introjects. Okay. So I run a practice once a week in the Mike Mandel Academy about ego states, and by far, introjects are what we have the most questions about and the most, I guess, confusion about. Introjects can be a person, a place, a thing, an event, something that happened in a person's life that left a very big impact on them and kind of attached itself to them. Some examples, I guess, the most common one you're going to see is people's parents and the beliefs that their parents had. Introjects are not necessarily good or bad. They're just something that made a strong impression on a person. So if you have an introject of, let's say, you went up to your mom to tell her something as a little kid that was really important to you, and she said, I'm on the phone, go away. I don't want to hear this right now, or just shut your mouth. And then there's this version of your mother in your head telling you, be quiet. And then that just stays with you. And then it becomes almost like a part. Like, it's very easy to confuse an introject with a part because they do kind of the same thing that parts do. They motivate behaviors. But if we have an introject of your mother always telling you, be quiet in the background whenever you're trying to do something, a terrible interject of a parent that I encountered once was, father, because it was their father. But whenever this person tried to do something, they would feel like they self-sabotaged. They would, if they're going to like a hypnosis conference and they've got a table set up, they picked a table that's furthest from where everybody's walking. If they're going to have a session with somebody, I'm feeling sick this day, I don't think I can. Every time they've set something up to do something, something steps in and kind of says, like, we're shutting this down. And with this person, what that was an interject of her father, who saw himself as an architect and an artist. And any time that he wanted to work on his creation, her parts would start to do something and make some noise, and then he'd scream at them that they need to be quiet. And so every time she tries to do something, in her head, she's not hearing necessarily this voice of her father, but there's something telling her, be quiet, be silent, go to the corner, be small. So the thing with introjects is they're hitchhikers. They are not really a part of the system like an ego state or a resource state part, whatever you want to call it, is. And they can be ejected at will. And that's a really good thing because they can cause a lot of problems. But I guess one of my teachers, Chrissa Bowman, of Quantum Journeys Hypnosis, she's talked about in her experience, if an interject, if you talk to it and I guess unmask it for what it is, sometimes it will dissolve. That has not always been my experience. Sometimes they're very sticky or they're very... they think they're in charge, particularly authority figure type interjects. But a technique that I really like to use, I learned this from, I think, Dr. Suzanne Chappell. I want to say she's up in Canada, maybe Toronto, where you interview the interject. Like you might literally take this person to their control room and form an interview room if you like. You can just do this at a table or picture them sitting with them anywhere they're comfortable and feel safe. But we're going to bring that interject in front of them. And they might not even know what it is. You might say, what is that voice that is telling you you're not good enough? Who is that? And can we bring them in front of you? Whatever it is. And then we're going to sit them down in front of us. We're going to tell them, okay, we're turning their volume knob down to 0, okay? So they can't talk to you right now. Now, in this moment, I want to prove to you that you're in control, that you have all the power here. So this is from Gordon Emerson. We're just going to shrink them down to like 1 inch tall, so that their voice is real squeaky like this. Because typically you're talking to a kid, and so you can be a little playful like that, right? And you can even say like, okay, and we're not trying to hurt them. We're not going to be careful you don't step on them. We're just going to make them very small so that they have no power here. But we're going to ask them, what have you been waiting to hear them say? What have you most been wanting to hear them say? And you can even have them suggest, I guess, in that kind of NLP second chair kind of way, float out of their body and into the body of the interject and have them speak and say like, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I know I was a tough father, but I had a lot going on and I really wish that I had been more caring or more in your life or whatever they want to say. And then you can have them also talk to the interject and say like, this is all the stuff that I've been meaning to say to you. Sometimes this is stuff they can say to the person in their real life, but sometimes that person is gone and that opportunity is no longer with them. But you can, it's very funny sometimes you'll have them vent to the interject about all the stuff they want to say and say, is there any other part that has anything to say to this guy? And sometimes it'll be no, and sometimes it'll be like, yeah, there's a whole crowd of parts here that want to go to unload on this guy. And so in that moment, again, from Dr. Suzanne Chappell, I really love this because it's very symbolic of cutting the cord. Where we're going to say, okay, so we're just going to look down around their feet or whatever for a person, something that's anthropomorphized in some way. It's much easier to do this. Well, you'll just notice there's a little power cord coming out of their ankle or wherever, and it's running back to Danny or Jody, whoever. And we're just going to unplug that power cord. They're going to power down, and we're going to take all that power back for Danny because they've been siphoning their energy and their focus and their attention, and we're going to take that back for her. And now that they're depowered, do you want them to stay or do you want them to go? I think it's very typical that if it's a parent figure, they'll want them to stay. It's not necessary. It's not like we're saying you're going to forget them from now on or anything. We're just removing the emotional kind of scar that was there that was causing this interference. So if they stay, I generally recommend, okay, so they're just a tiny little statue that's very still and has no volume. We're just going to put them up on the shelf. And we can always remember that they were there and honor their presence, but they have no more influence over you as this part that we're talking to. If they want them to go, then you don't have to do any big theatrics. You can just go, okay, 3, 2, 1, they're gone. Simple as that. And sometimes they will say like, okay, I want to smash them with a hammer. Let them do that if they want. They're not murdering anybody in real life. It's just a concept, an idea that has been tagging along with them for a long time and causing problems. Arguably, I think it's not a problem to have positive interjects, like the interject you remember of, I fell down and scraped my knee and my mom came up and made me feel better. That's a nice thing to have. But it is, I guess, good to take note of the fact that it is something that is plugged into the system. It is something that is drawing their energy and attention. And if you don't want it there, it's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It depends on what they want. But I don't go seeking out all interjects, just the ones that are causing problems. Okay, highest wisdom. This is kind of a weird one. I don't know if there is a concept of the highest wisdom in other things, but at least in Mike Mandel, where I learned, we're talking about, you could call it different things, highest self, pure self, highest consciousness, whatever you want. That's kind of a mouthful. The highest wisdom is the part that's been with you the longest. Chris Bowman says even in the womb, this is maybe the first part that formed with you. This is the part that loves you the most. It wants you to see, all parts want to see you successful, but this part knows what you want and how it's familiar with all of your other parts. All of the other parts respect it and listen to it, and it's a great facilitator to invite into these encounters. If you have a part that is not wanting to talk to you directly because it's scared or something, the highest wisdom can help you with that. Let's say we just have a part that's calling itself wisdom as the highest wisdom. That part that doesn't want to talk to you can say, okay, I know that they can still hear me, so I'm just going to talk and they can listen. But if there's anything that they want to say, they can tell highest wisdom, and highest wisdom can tell me, okay? And typically in that kind of interaction, they'll find out, oh, it doesn't feel so bad to talk to them after all, and they'll just start to come to the front themselves. But highest wisdom is incredible. This is something that I think if you're doing any parts work, it's good. If you want to avoid having an ab reaction, not necessarily, I think, something that is, I think ab reactions are not all negative. Sometimes it's really good to vent that stuff out, like the crying fit or shaking or whatever. But if you want to avoid ab reactions, highest wisdom is a really good way to do that because we're kind of dissociated in that sense. The Vedic state is still very much feeling their things, but the highest wisdom, who is very able to comfort them and help them feel like seen and heard, can stay at the front and keep things relatively stable in that interaction. I realized we didn't talk about how to address parts and how to even, I guess, figure out what they do and that kind of thing. So why don't we talk about how do we interact with ego states? The most basic information that you're going to want to get from an ego state is, what do you like to call yourself and what do you do? This is a question that if a person is not familiar with parts work or has never done it before, or the parts have never been in a conversation about themselves in this way before, they might not have an answer because they've never thought about themselves in those terms, like as an individual. And they're kind of individuals. They're sub-personalities, but they're a much more narrow focus of a personality than the broader kind of consciousness that is you. But if you ask a part, what is its name, or what do you like to call yourself, is actually a question I like to ask, because a name implies that it's something that they already have. But what do you like to call yourself is something that gives them a little bit more autonomy in choosing that. But they might have to think about it a little bit, like, when they're doing their job when they have a name, that's something that's more for these interactions in these sessions. It's not something for when they're actually functioning and doing the things in their day-to-day. They don't say like happiness showing up for work here. It's just they move in, do their job, move back. It's not like clocking in and out. So when you ask them what their name is, they might come up with something that's just a description of their job. It might be a person's name. It might not make any sense at all. That's okay, but it's important that we, in those moments, write down these things because you might be dealing with a whole number of different parts and parts that are changing names as you're going through this process. And then what do you do? What is your role that you perform for Jody? This is also a question that might confuse them initially because they don't think of themselves in those terms. They just do what they do. And to have a job is maybe a more specific. It's fitting what they do into a mold, and when you do that, it's kind of unfamiliar for parts. So they might have to think about it, and they might say, "I protect them," is what an answer you'll commonly get, and so you can just kind of narrow in on that. Okay, so when you're protecting them, how do you do that? Like, when do you show up? What's happening when you come in to do your job, and how do you know when your job is done? And what do you know? How do you know when you've done a good job? And you can always stress, like, because I know that you are doing a good job. You're always trying to do a good job, and you're always trying to help. But in these situations, like, what is your goal? Like, what are you trying to accomplish when you're doing your job? And So when we branch out from those two basic questions, who are you and what do you do, then we can start to get involved with like, okay, so who are the other parts that you encounter in your job? And very quickly, even if you're not necessarily looking for a problem, you're going to start hearing about problems. Like, oh yeah, there's this guy. this jerk who always stands in the way when I'm trying to do my job. And the funny thing is, when they realize that they can vent some of their frustrations about these things, sometimes it'll be like, oh, here comes a crowd of parts that are like, oh, me too. I want to talk about the thing that's making me angry as well. I'm trying really hard not to cuss. Sorry. But it's funny. Like once they realize, oh, somebody's listening. Somebody can hear the thing that I thought I just kind of had to deal with, and they're offering the ability to make changes about this. This is really important. So very quickly you're going to encounter, this is the guy that's messing with my job, or this is the guy that's holding up the works in some way. And this is what I think of as the inner landscape. Kind of, what was the title? Changing Our Inner Landscapes for this presentation, I think. Our inner landscape, it can be kind of barren in some ways in that it's not an actual landscape. It's a series of different parts that are interchangeably moving in and out of that executive. And that can be a smooth process for somebody who's relatively emotionally mature and stable and feeling happy. And it can be like a disaster for somebody who's experiencing a lot of mental disruption in their life, or somebody that they've got a lot of external factors that might be stressing them out or whatever, and the parts that are feeling overwhelmed, etc. So that inner landscape can be quite rocky, or it can be pretty smooth. With parts, it's important to be kind. It's important to be patient and respectful. It's important to understand that sometimes you're dealing with children. That might not be immediately obvious, but you want to use simple language, simple questions. If you're asking a very convoluted 3-part question, a part is probably going to say, what? They are not used to having to think about things in such complicated terms, because frankly, they move at a much faster speed they move at the speed of thought. So when they're having a discussion between each other, that's something that's happening instantaneously. Whereas when we're talking to them, it's kind of a different experience for them in some ways. All of these parts are dealing with the real world when they're coming to the executive, but they're not dealing with it in a way where you're talking to that part as who they are. And so that sense of individuality and that sense of self is not something they're used to. And as an aspect of that, they don't understand that they can change what they do, and they don't understand they can choose something better if they want something that would make them happier. And this is a huge revelation to parts generally. It's the idea that, oh, okay, I do this job where this person, they have anxiety about things, and so I am the part that says, what if? And I throw all these obstacles in their path to make them slow down. What if this part, instead of doing that, worked with another part, or just changed the way they approach these problems of, here's an obstacle on our path, we got to stop it and examine it. How about we look for paths around that obstacle? We're talking about metaphorical things here with all of these parts because we're talking about things that are happening in your mind. But for them, metaphor is very important because it's how they experience literally everything. They're just little ephemeral thoughts in your mind, imagination. And so when we're talking about changing their job, sometimes it is very fantastical in image. I don't know how, familiar the larger hypnosis world is with the concept of mindscaping, but in Mike Mandel, there's this concept of you're having the client provide imagery, and you're exploring this kind of mental map, and the things that you change in this map change how their behaviors work. It's things that ripple out to their parts. It's things that ripple out to introjects. It's things that ripple out to their unconscious mind and their motivations, obviously. And with parts, you can do kind of some of the same things. For example, a part that I worked with recently, who's kind of a not good enough type of part. This person had a mother who was very domineering and arguably maybe narcissistic, gaslighting, kind of a lot of trauma from making her feel like she was always a failure. And there was this part who kind of saw itself as living in the dump, and in her words, has all the shit dumped on her. So whenever other parts are suffering or feeling bad in some way, this part is the whipping boy that receives all of that bad stuff. And obviously that part was in a lot of pain, but she didn't realize that she could do something else. It was just her job to be suffering all the time. So I asked her, okay, so let's not worry about what the other parts want here and what they're expecting you to do. Let's just talk about what you want. And she says, I want to have a little garden. This woman loves to garden, and so all of her parts, to some degree, love gardening too. And so she just pictured in the dump there growing tomato plants at first. And I said, oh, that's really good. So what else would you want to grow in here now that you see that you can grow something in this? Because all this shit, maybe we can use it as fertilizer. Maybe it can be recycled into something new, essentially. I don't think I used that word, recycled. This is something that came up for her. But how can we repurpose this and have you feel happier about this? And then she got excited. She's like, oh, well, okay. I want an orange tree. I really love orange trees. I don't think orange trees are something that can grow where she lives, and so it's kind of an aspirational thing for her. And so we have her grow an orange tree out of the shit, and then she's like, but what if I had a whole bunch of them? What do you call it when there's a whole bunch of like fruit trees? That's an orchard or a grove or whatever. So now she's got this vast orchard of orange trees. And I'm thinking, okay, I ask her, do you want other parts to come and help you with this? And she says no. And so I'm not going to tell her what to do, but I'm going to try to nudge her in the direction of cooperation. So I say, okay, so could we imagine just some little worker bees coming into this orchard to pollinate the oranges and help them to grow healthy and everything? She's like, oh yeah. So now we've got a bunch of hives, and there's a bunch of worker bees going around. And this, I think, opens her to the idea of having other things come into that space. And then as this part, who was formerly not good enough, they want to be recyclist now. Not necessarily a grammatical word, but that's fine. We don't care about that. So recyclist's job now is to take the manure of the bad emotions and channel it into these oranges. And then there's these hives of bees that are making honey. And now their recyclist has these factories that's making orange juice. And the orange peels are also going into the recycling. And the honey is being turned into this and that. And now the other parts are starting to filter in. And she says, okay, now the other parts are like, they're climbing the trees, they're eating pancakes with, I think she described it as orange syrup. I don't know if that's a thing.
It is in her mind.
Yeah, and
absolutely. And
all of them are enjoying it, and all of them are celebrating Recyclist for doing this amazing thing and providing this space that it's making me get a little teary-eyed, honestly.
Yeah. That's an amazing metaphor, and it's really special.
Yeah, this isn't going to fix all the problems in her life, obviously, but it'll help her feel better and feel not so put upon with all of these things that felt like they were weighing her down before. Now she's rechanneling them into something that feels organic and powerful and filled with life and kids running around and happy. And what time are we at, by the way? I should double check that.
It's 11:30.
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay. That repurposing and kind of changing this part from, I think, kind of a dirty little girl standing in a dump to this, I want to say Recyclist changed into a man, maybe. Mm-hmm. Their gender is not overly important in these situations. It's just how they perceive, I guess, what the qualities of the traits that they exhibit are. And so a woman might have parts that are male or vice versa, or even like highest wisdom might be opposite. I think my highest wisdom is actually female. Mm-hmm. Kind of interesting to find out. So that's how we help in these situations, is we're trying to take those parts that are struggling in some way and find a solution where they feel happy with what they're doing. Recyclist, formerly not good enough, is doing the same job that they were doing before. They're taking the shit, but now they're doing it in a way that makes them happy and the other parts feel like really happy about. And in that way, like, she's cooperating more with the other parts because she was just this isolated little kid before who was kind of stuck off to the side and considered herself to be, I don't know, kind of trash. I mean, she saw herself in a dump. And now she's like this important person who's taking on a role for all the others, and the others are celebrating her. Like, she was picturing the parts like giving her a big group hug around recyclist now, saying like, thank you for doing this. We appreciate it. You're amazing. And she's laughing and smiling by the end of this session, and that's the goal, right? In that situation, I don't know that we're necessarily fixing a specific problem there. We're just helping the things that are causing emotional turmoil in the background to be resolved so that the problems can kind of fix themselves over time. And that's not necessarily, it's certainly not a finishing point. I think it's a starting point. It's something that I'm fond of saying is all of these things are just starting points with little finish lines in between, because there's never really an ultimate finish line, I guess, until we die, I suppose. But the goal is constant growth and constant adaptiveness and ability to take the shit that life's give you and turn it into something good.
Turn it into orange juice. Turn it into orange juice
Yeah.
and honey.
A really appetizing idea.
But, it works. It works. And I think, that was, like you said, such a life-changing thing for that person, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just to be able to reframe in that way.
So, how do we frame this? I think that literally everybody experiences their parts communicating on a daily basis. We just don't really think of it in those terms. I think the easiest way that I frame it typically is we talk about old cartoons like Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny or whatever, the idea of the angel and the devil on the shoulder. Now that's a little bit loaded in terms of good guy, bad guy, but we're all familiar with the idea of having conflicting ideas going on where you want to do one thing, or one part of you wants to do one thing, another part wants to do a different thing. There are a lot of depictions in the media that I have found to be kind of on the nose with parts work. Something that was kind of ahead of its time in that way was a show from the 80s called Herman's Head. It's about a guy named Herman who half the cast is him in his life as a guy in an office and having a girlfriend and everything. And then half of the show takes place inside of his head where there's archetypes of different things. So there's like the sex drive, who's kind of a crude frat boy type. There's the intellectual, there's the caring one that's female, there's, I don't remember, I didn't watch the show, it was on when I was a little kid and I didn't care about it then. I'm vaguely familiar with it, but archetypes of different concepts that he would have to deal with, and as he deals with those things, the different ones step to the front and deal with it. The most obvious one, I suppose, it's a little less, I think, good for illustrating perfectly what parts work is, but the Inside Out movies by Pixar. You have joy, sadness, anger, disgust, I think fear or something like that.
All in a little control room.
Yeah, in a little control room at the control panel. And you'll notice there's only one in control at a time. And the story of the movie is how those parts learn to work together instead of one controlling everything. Like, I must be happy at all times, things start to fall apart because happiness can't control everything. There's necessity for sadness. There's necessity for emotional, I think, a spectrum, right? And then the second one brings in kind of the more complicated teenage feelings like anxiety and things. And those movies are really, really good, I think, for giving a very basic framework of how this stuff works, because we're talking about little characters in your mind that are stepping in to take control of very specific things, and that they have very different ways of doing that, and some of them are going to cause disasters. One that I think it's very strange to think that this was such an amazing example, but there was a Marvel movie recently called Thunderbolts. Is it Thunderbolts? Yeah, I think so. It's about a bunch of ex-bad guys becoming heroes, but the main bad guy in this movie is a guy with a fated state who, like, I can't think of any other movie that has so very specifically portrayed the concept of fated states. The main character is what's her name? Florence Pugh is the actress. We'll just say her name is Florence. But Florence, she has this incident that is her ISE. It's when she had to lure another child into the woods to be murdered as her initiation into an assassin's thing. And it's the worst day of her life. It's the thing that caused her, I think, to feel a lot of pain as an adult, that she throws herself into her work. She drinks a lot. And she's literally, as a result of this kind of superhero with evaded state, she's thrown into that ISE, and she gets to see it in real time. And there's just this little kid version of her that is experiencing this over and over again. And when she tries to change it, she gets booted out of it. But I was not expecting to see a Marvel movie that dealt so specifically with this stuff. I highly recommend that movie if you're interested in parts work to take a look at it. It was very surprising. Let's see, what else can I talk about? I think just some of the weird things that I've noticed in doing some of this work. How forgetting things works. I'm sure anybody who's done this work for a while will eventually have somebody come up to you and ask, "Can you help me forget this thing?" And typically as hypnotists, I don't think that's how we tend to want to deal with things. We more want to help them manage their feelings around that thing rather than just, we're not trying to erase history. We're trying to make history something you can cope with. But how forgetting works is that if all your parts are in agreement to turn their backs when they see that thing, then you'll forget it. And if it's something that's not very emotionally invested, then it's easy to do that. If it's something that's much more emotionally fraught, like an ex-girlfriend or whatever, then it's probably not going to work very well, because there will be some part that is holding on to the feelings there that won't be on board with forgetting. But you can do some fun stuff with that. Like if you want to have somebody forget their favorite book so they can read it again for the first time, that's something you can do with parts work by having them just agree, like, okay, this goes in the vault, and it goes on the shelf in the vault. We're going to lock it up, and until we reach whatever trigger you install to have them reintegrate their old memories, you don't remember this thing. And so now here's this favorite book or favorite show that you wanted to watch for the first time. Kind of fun. Something I don't see hypnotists really talk about that much, because it sounds weird or dangerous, but it's harmless. The reintegration of the memories, it doesn't cause any problems. It's just a fun way to experience something for the first time again. Changing form. When we talk about changing a state to help it be something better, typically that involves also changing its form, from being a dirty little child to being a man of industry or whatever, having nice clothes or more colorful clothes, or going from a little kid to an adult, or whatever changes they feel are most beneficial in those ways. And I was talking to somebody about this just after a session, because they were curious about parts work, and of course her parts were listening. They're always listening. And this person, her parts had a space that they considered to be their relaxation space. It was like hot pools in a cave where they go to kind of float and soak. And they were finding that when they did that, it was relaxing, but they still were thinking about their jobs. So then they heard me talking about changing form changes how a part, how it functions. And so they all started changing themselves into rubber ducks when they went to this hot pool. This is something they decided for themselves, and she told me about later. But she has a whole bunch of different parts that go to this pool. They're all changing into different rubber ducks that look a little bit different. Like her most grounded part changes into one that kind of looks like a real duck, but it's fake. Her smallest part, that's kind of a young part, is a little white one. Her vigilant part, who wears an eye patch, ironically, is a rubber duck with an eye patch. Her creative part is a rubber duck with like orange troll doll hair, because that part sees itself as a troll doll. So all of these little parts change themselves. I maybe need to have somebody make a painting of this at some point or something, but all these little rubber ducks with different character traits floating in a pool, just relaxing and letting go of their jobs. That was something that was unexpected, but it works for her parts. I don't know if it would work for everybody. And that was really funny to me, that they just decided to do this. Vacations. Parts can need vacations the same as regular people. I mean, something that I think we don't realize when talking about parts work, in my experience, is that everything that you can do in hypnosis with a person normally can also be done with parts. A mindscape, guided meditation or guided imagery, all of this stuff works quite well with parts as well. I mean, because they're just people. I mean, they're smaller, maybe versions of people, but they're just people. And sometimes they need vacations, they need time away, and that's very helpful for them. I remember there was a part for a woman who was experiencing a lot of disruption in her thought process named Bam Bam. Bam Bam's job was to hit everything with a stick. That's his job was just to go in and disrupt what every other part was doing with a stick. And the other parts obviously didn't like Bam Bam very much because they didn't like being attacked. And I asked Bam Bam what they wanted to do, and he said he wanted to swim. And I said, okay, so when you picture yourself swimming, where is that? Like, is it in deep water? Is it in a swimming pool? They said, deep water. I said, okay, that kind of sounds like scuba diving or snorkeling, so where would you want to do that? And they said, well, I want to see like coral reefs and stuff. And so Bam Bam, over the course of this discussion, turns into Mermaid. Mermaid has a boat with really good sonar so they can find the best coral reefs, and they just go to places like Costa Rica in this person's mind and snorkel. And then other parts go with them on vacation to Costa Rica to snorkel. Other parts have built themselves like a golf course. Other parts build themselves a sauna. Other parts, like if they have a space where they feel like they can go to decompress, it can be incredibly helpful. The same as a person, right? If there's something that you love to do that helps you to get all of that stress out, your parts, if you're working with a stressed out part, help them to build something like that, or ask them what would be the thing that helps them most in that way. They might even change fully from being a part that does that job to just a part that is permanently on that vacation, and then another part can step in and take that old job. I've had parts that went from being like working in an organizational office for a person to being, let's see, there were 3 of them. One went to run a salon. I don't know what that meant for her, this part, but she was running a salon. Another part was running a roadside vegetable stand. Another part was just relaxing on a lounge chair on a beach. And they were all on vacation, basically. They were stepping away from the things that were stressing them out and that were overwhelming them. And other parts stepped in to take their place. And those parts were really enthusiastic and had a lot of new energy. And that was really helpful for that person. They started to not feel so paralyzed by all of this. They were having to deal with a ton of like courtroom paperwork type stuff. Extremely overwhelming. They were kind of acting as their own lawyer, and all of her organizational parts were just like at their wits' end. And then some new ones came in, and she got so much done. It was really, really amazing. This is a weird one. Pranks. Your parts can prank you. This is one that I experienced, and I didn't realize I was being pranked until I got further into understanding myself with hypnosis and that kind of thing. But when I would shower, when you go to wash your body with soap, so many times, I don't know how many times this happened, more than I can count, I would turn off the shower and realize I still had soap in my left armpit. And then one day, after I'd become more in touch with my own parts and that kind of thing, my ego states, I heard in my head the intake of breath of like, kind of like you would expect, I don't know, a classroom who's waiting for a teacher to sit on a tack or something, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then I turned off the water, checked my armpit, still soapy, and in my head, laughter and cheering of, we got him again. And I realized, oh my God, they've been doing this whole time. And now I'm wise to that, so it doesn't happen that often anymore. But then they got me, okay. So I guess the cherry on top to this prank was that I realized what was going on, and I thought that I was immune to it. And so then I one day took a shower, turned it off, armpits not soapy so they didn't get me. I'm getting out of the shower, and I realize I'm still soapy from the waist down. So it was like them saying, oh, you think that you're immune to this? No, yeah. Like you're completely still soapy. Like, so that after that, it fell off. I think there's other ways they get me sometimes by like constantly trying to catch my pockets on handles of cupboards and things. Mm-hmm. Whenever I catch that, I hear a laugh in my head. I suspect sometimes when these things happen over and over again, that might be your parts messing with you in ways. Because, I mean, I feel like that's what I would do if I were stuck in my head and wanting to kind of play around a little bit. Your parts can be playful, and they can kind of throw you off in that way. Last one, supply closet. This is kind of a weird one. Okay. Why don't we talk about the table first? In Mike Mandel's academy, there's a protocol called the Healing Committee. In Chris Bowman, I think it's called the Money Table. This is not exactly those things. I mean, as with all of things in hypnosis, the form is not particularly important, it's the function. I do like a good table, because how many important conversations have happened at a table in history? I think tables are very versatile for being just a simple object, and we're all familiar with sitting at them. But when you've got something that you're wanting to work on with a lot of parts, and we're starting to work together, and we're starting to build a team, we can start to build kind of a committee. And you can just represent that by having them come and sit down at a table. And most immediately, you can have the parts that are directly involved that you're talking to immediately for that problem, but then you can say, okay, so we've got this problem here at the center of the table that we're working on together. Now, who else wants to come and join this table? We're assembling Knights of the Round Table here or something, where joy, curiosity, passion, confidence, all of these kind of background parts that are more like archetypes of feelings rather than the parts that are really directly dealing with the world, calm. These are all parts that people tend to have in common in some way. Can they start to come to the table, the ones that want to join this party? And we can consider it to be an open invitation to any parts that want to come and help with this specific project. And then we can decide, is there a part that needs to be in charge of this? You can bring highest wisdom in and say, like, highest wisdom, do you think there's a specific part that should be in charge of this? Maybe they want to take a more democratic approach where they decide together. The goal there is this table becomes kind of a communication network, and you can specify specifically that it is that. You can say, like, you can use this table as a form of communication, or you can pretend, or you can imagine that you have cell phones, walkie-talkies, headsets, whatever makes sense to you in forms of a communication network. But all of these parts are working specifically together now on this thing, and when that thing is in front of you, those parts are solving it together. And you can also say, like, and can we also include Danny in this communication network, and test that connection, make sure that it's consistent and clear. And maybe we can not have her have to hear all of this conversation so much as pick a representative who will relay kind of the summary, the AI summary or whatever, of the meeting notes of what's important or what they need from you or what you need from them. I think part of the problem with parts is that they do their job, but there's not a lot of communication necessarily between you and your parts of what you want. And so as long as you're breathing and standing, your heart's beating, they're doing their job. But if you're in communication with them, then you can say, okay, we're moving away from donuts. We're moving away from sitting on the couch. We're moving more towards going to the gym or getting on the elliptical or whatever, or we're moving more towards healthy snacks, etc. We're not keeping our parts guessing about how they do their jobs. We're giving them specific instructions. And in that way, you mold their behaviors, and over time, that just becomes more natural and easy for them. And that can start at a table. And next to this table, we can start to build out things like, here's a classroom or a meeting room like we're in right now. Or I think for one person, an amphitheater, like a circle of rocks outside. And you can say, okay, and here's all the things on this table that these different parts like or enjoy. Like this part likes tea, this part likes snow cones, this part likes grilling steak. We can have all of these things available for them here or in their own spaces, but also we can have the supply closet. Now the supply closet is interesting because when you think about humans and how they have weird superpowers sometimes, these are all things that come from the unconscious mind. I think I have a few. One superpower. I have a part that I refer to as stopwatch who's always counting time. So if I set a timer on the microwave it's like 2.5 minutes that this needs to go in the frying pan, I can go walk away and go do something, And eventually I'll start to get the idea, I need to go back in. I'll walk in, 2 seconds left on the timer. If I want to wake up at a specific time, I can say, okay, I'm going to sleep. I need to wake up at 7 o'clock. Stopwatch will wake me up at 7 o'clock on the dot. That's really handy. It's really useful. It's not something necessarily everybody can do. I can also tell time with one finger. See, like that. Maybe not a superpower, more of a joke. But what else? I can put myself into a coma when I get onto a plane. I don't like sitting on planes. It's uncomfortable. The air feels very stale. So when I sit down in my seat, I pass out. And this is something that I didn't really cultivate. It's just something that a part of me was like, I see that we don't like doing this. I'm going to step in and just make us unconscious for the duration of this. I don't know. I'm sure there's others. So when we talk about what we can get from the supply closet, it's a very mundane idea. Maybe that starts out as just supplies for parts to do their jobs. Like an organizational part goes in there for a calculator or a notepad or whatever. But then we can think of it more as, I don't know, the TARDIS from Doctor Who. It's bigger on the inside, right? Infinite space. And in this supply closet are tools from the unconscious. It might be time dilation. It might be more coordination. It might be perception, like a telescope for a part that is vigilant, or drones that go out searching in the peripheral vision. It could be whatever they can imagine would work to help them to do their jobs in ways that seem fantastical or impossible. And it's really fun to find a part that wants to maybe take over that supply closet, kind of your, we're talking about James Bond, your Q, the guy who gets you gadgets and little tools for your job and funnels them to the guys that are doing the job. And so I've seen somebody whose supply closet, as I worked with them, has turned into this gigantic warehouse full of people testing things and playing with things and trying things out. I think there's no limits. There's physical limits, obviously, to what you can do, but there are no limits to what you can imagine the supply closet can provide. And so I always encourage parts to take big swings when they're playing with the supply closet. Like, try something that you think might not work and see how it does. And is there a way that you can make it work partially, or a way that you can, or does it teach you something new about something else? Like, to explore what the limits are of what the unconscious can provide in terms of just helping support you in ways that you wouldn't expect. So, last thing I guess that I wanted to talk about was the triple warmer, that little exercise we did right at the beginning. This is how you bring parts into the executive on purpose. What we're looking for is a laundry list of the things that you want to do in that moment. So I'm articulate. I love to learn, and I love to help other people learn. I'm enthusiastic. I'm confident. I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling energetic. I'm accessing all of my resources, et cetera, et cetera. All of it, like basically affirmations, but things that you're trying to bring to the forefront. And as you tap that triple warmer there, that little channel there between your ring finger and pinky finger, it's very easy to find. We're activating the ego states that most fit within the parameters that you're specifying there. And then you're kind of anchoring it and locking it in place with that little awesome anchor. For me, it's momentum, because my primary part that does most of the things in my life is named momentum. I don't know what he used to be named, but he named himself that when I discovered parts, because it was an aspirational thing for him. Like, I want more momentum in my life. So if you're feeling like you need to get into a new headspace, shake yourself out like a wet dog. Like, get your shoulders moving a little bit and change the way that you're breathing a little bit, maybe speed it up or slow it down. Slowing down is probably more helpful, but make it different. And then access your triple warmer there. I don't know why it's called the triple warmer. It's basically acupressure. But we'll tap that space there and just talk about the things that you want to feel, and the way that you want to be, and the things that you want to be able to do, and lock it in. And that will be a way that you can kind of get yourself into the flow, into the mindset that you need to be.
All right, so that was so fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that wonderful presentation. Took so many notes. And I wanted to let everyone know that you are all invited to our next chapter meeting. It is going to be July 11th. Again, that second Saturday, 10 to noon at the Northeast Library on 35th in Seattle. And of course, we will be here online as well. So absolutely welcome to come back and join us. And again, if you'd like to join us as a member and you're not a member yet, you can find us at NGH-WA.org. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time.